Welcome to Event Marketing Redefined. Thank you, as always, taking time out of your day. Greatly appreciate it. Hopefully, we put on a great show for you today. Today, Will Curran is with us. He is the head of Klik at Bizzabo, which, if you don't know what that is, we will kind of give you not a sales pitch on it, but just a brief intro in terms of what it is. Will's got a really cool background in events, very passionate in events. He does speaking engagement in events, really passionate about AI, how it will affect events, community inside of events, and then really just general nature of like where events are going and why. Will, we've had some cool talks. I'm excited to have you on, and thanks for being here.
I'm just so stoked to be here, Matt, and thank you so much for having me.
Cool. Let's rock and roll because I feel like we have cool stuff to talk about. So first, same thing I asked. I said, what, your head of Klik. I didn't know what that was. Just give us briefly, what is Klik? What are you doing? This way.
Yes. Yeah. So Klik essentially is a product by Bizzabo that is essentially an ecosystem that allows you to plan more engaging, more data-rich events. So basics of it for everybody who's watching video right now is that it's the center of it's a smart badge. The badge basically allows people and has a little device right on the back of it that allows people to click their badges together and instantly trade contact information. We can do really cool stuff like light up badges, different colors. It allows you to do lead capture for exhibitors. And then the best part about it is because the technology is so engaging, it literally has 100% adoption rate whenever you put it around somebody's neck. It also allows you to track your attendees where they are in the venue. So no longer are the days of wondering how, what's the ROI of this area that I spent a ton of money on, or, what sessions were most popular. Now you can literally know all that data for events. So my job right now is just preaching the good word about how there is now a way for us to actually track the ROI of events. And this is something I wish I had when I started my agency 16 years ago and, been doing events forever in all different shapes and sizes. So this is just a technology I'm super passionate about.
Very cool. Thanks for giving that rundown. Bizzabo did not pay for Will to be on the show. I personally paid Will the opposite to be on the show. Not just kidding. No, that's a good rundown. It's also a cool product, right? I mean, the simplicity of it, I think, is really, really cool. Like, kind of what it allows you to capture. So I want to go to community first, because I think community is really a trending topic, and for really good reason. It's not like a bullshit topic, right? And I mean, part of the reason that we started Event Marketing Redefined, there's various reasons, but one of them is that I felt like there needed to be a place to a degree where people could hear very honest, candid conversation around trade shows, events, brand activations in this event marketing world. So I don't know if I necessarily had a community in mind to build, but in a sense, a communal type of feel. So give us a little bit like the significance, your thoughts on community, why you think it's going to be a factor for event marketing in the future and right now.
For sure. I was similar to you. Like, as I was creating content, you realize you start building this community, and, not only you have the option to be able to share your stuff with them, but also, like, a lot of times our communities that naturally get built, they have so much to offer as well. Like, you're seeing so many people in the chat right now. For example, Wendy, who's joining us, who's also commenting and talking back as part of the conversation. And I think that's really what people are seeking now. And it's what people are seeking in terms of like the comment section within YouTube and the comment section within an Instagram post, is that it's like, they're looking for that sort of community. Well, for me, I've definitely felt like, why community I think is so important for this next year is that a couple of things. I feel like people are starting to kind of feel icky about social media, that we do it because it's the standard for us to stay in touch, know what's going on, how, see our friends' baby pictures, all those things like that. Right. But in reality, we get on and it's, we're getting forced ads that we maybe don't want to be seeing. We, start seeing, things that maybe frustrate us. And then, sometimes there's not the most healthy conversations that are happening on social media. So I've always just felt like it's kind of been this mess space. And like the one for me is that I've been slowly like peeling away from social media. I don't have Instagram anymore. I don't have Facebook. A lot of that has to do with my opinions on Meta, but I've always kept my LinkedIn. But even when I log on my LinkedIn, I log in and I see my feed, and as somebody who's I consider pretty successful in the events industry, like I've been doing this for a while, I get on and I consider myself also very confident. I feel like I lose confidence when I log on. I feel like I'm not doing enough. I'm not, I could be doing better. And, I think that's a feeling that is not healthy for our mindset. So, but what I do think is that people still need these spaces to ask questions and get answers. So where I think the power of community comes is that people are looking for community, but are feeling the stray away from social media. And the opportunity for events is that we also build communities while we're at our events. But then where do we direct them? To an email list, to follow us on social media? I think there's an opportunity to send people to a private online community that you build that looks and feels like social media, but is dedicated to what the people who attend your event already care about. So for example, if you're doing a marketing conference, you have the opportunity to build a marketing community around that and to put them in these private networks and have more control over it, to be ultimately where this is where it becomes the business case, is that it's a channel that you fully control. It's no longer rented land on social media. I've always been like a rented versus owned land person in terms of my strategy of social media, is always try to push them towards something that you fully control, that you have full options over, and that you aren't basing everything off an algorithm that might change tomorrow.
Yeah. I think one of the things with that is, I feel like we were talking earlier, people want peer-to-peer information, right? From a marketing standpoint, social media standpoint, everything's gotten really saturated, right? Everybody knows that your blog is written offshore and your bulk
or by AI now.
Yeah. I mean, it can be written literally by AI, right? So the peer-to-peer is so important because you're able to get, people want information validation from their peers doing the same job. So I had an episode, I had Sam Zelich on. He works for Squarespace. Squarespace kind of has their own community, right? They have these group of people that like love Squarespace and building websites on them, whether they're agencies or whether they're just like one-off people that build websites or whatever they do. And he runs an event for Squarespace, but it's really it started as like a user conference, right? But now it's shifted into a community per se. He calls it a community. He runs the event like a community. I think that is a strategy for a lot of larger companies that have a following, that have users, that have distributors, that have that. So I don't know if you want to talk about that more, but that has had my wheels kind of turning to leverage an event through community.
Yeah. I mean, like that's the most amazing part about this trend, is that I think we all already have communities. We just don't sometimes call them that. And that, or, we aren't necessarily harnessing the full power of that together. For me, in a lot of ways too, like for example, the Squarespace example, it starts as a user conference and things like that, but then eventually it grows to probably people are just generally passionate about web design and using their website as a marketing piece. And, when you look at it, especially if you already are starting to have these user bases and things like that, a lot of times community can solve other challenges beyond just the marketing element to bring people together, but
like customer service,
almost
right? Doing customer service for you. Yeah. It's interesting.
100%. And this isn't new, right? Like we've had forms attached to brands for a long period of time. The difference with this is that we need to, like, where I'm kind of harping in 2023 and beyond, is that it needs to be a great experience doing this, so for example, I'll harp for a second on associations. A lot of times associations fall into the trap of using association management softwares, and they have community features, forms, messaging, but it sucks to use them. And they're just a painful experience. But what we need to start doing is thinking about it like, why is Facebook successful? Why is Instagram successful? Why is LinkedIn successful? It's because they're constantly focusing on the user experience, making it as easy to use as possible. And that's really where I feel like, software, for example, like Mighty Networks and Circle are really powerful tools that allow you to very cheaply start putting your audience into a private area. And I think the other piece of this too is that you brought up like how blog content and content marketing is not as successful as it used to be. Like this year got completely disrupted. What we thought was like, oh, AI is eventually going to come for content. Now, immediately, I think we're going to see this space in the next 2-3 years that content marketing is no longer going to be successful. That unless you're doing super high-end cinema quality video that can't be recreated by AI, or you're like creating an amazing podcast conversation that people want to listen to. I honestly, written blog content, even very short form video content, is all getting just disrupted completely by AI. And I know we'll talk about AI in a little bit, but that's another reason why community is great, is because people still want to ask, hey, what products do you recommend, that from people who actually use them? Or what did you do in this situation? And it's not just a summary of 5 people's super smart ideas, but instead you're hearing directly from someone's mouth saying, yeah, here's how you plan a super engaging event.
What would you say to somebody who's like a head of events or event marketer at a company, and they've been running event, it's a user conference summit style thing, right, where they're bringing in either partners, users, channel distributor partners, right? It's a collection of people using the same product, service, doing something. They're running an event, right? What kind of advice would you give them to say, hey, leverage this into a community? Or like, what are the steps they have to take? What could they do to give it more of a communal feel?
So one thing I think is that you got to give them a space to go to start talking that isn't just within the event app. I will lay on my sword that last year I believed that like your event app could be your community app. I don't think that event apps are moving in that direction enough. They all were talking about it, but I think now with everything changing in the events industry, that's not going to really ever happen. But I think what you need to do is give them this space. So, I'm a big fan of the private networks using Circle, Mighty Network stores, systems like that. But like, for example, you could technically do this on LinkedIn. Send everybody to a LinkedIn group. Send them to a space where they can continue to find who attended the event, ask questions, post things, share their learnings from the event. And, if I were to think from a technical perspective of how you would do this, is that I think the easier it is for someone to go from being an event attendee to being in your community, the better. And the way I would do this is I'd create some sort of a single sign-on system that whatever password and email I use to log into the event app, all I have is one click to click into the community, and it's all within one system. So I don't have another password. I don't have to sign up again. I can just go in. My profile information from the event app already comes over. I think that sort of stuff is where, you can really just point people in this one direction, and you'll be amazed, especially if you're already doing an event, the energy that happens right before, during, and after the event is almost more powerful than any kind of marketing you can do to try to grow a community. It's literally just take the energy you're having and redirect it right in the right place.
That's cool. I like that. I think the ability, like, depending again, your product, your service, why you're hosting this event, right? I was always thinking to myself, like, okay, like, what are the needs of those people? What are the common problems that they have, common questions, and then how do you rally them together, like you're saying, to solve each other's problems, or have an open forum, like a Reddit style chat where, right? Like, my buddy works for a company that makes these incredible fan systems for huge commercial buildings, right? They have all these distributors and users, and people love the fan. Like, for them, it would be like this space where they could, like, I don't know, get advice on how to fix the fan, or advice on what to do next with whatever it may be. But that can kind of help bring community together and be a place to start as like a questionnaire style thing, just something to get it in the direction where people are talking to each other about the same thing. Amanda has a question. Can you talk more about how to make it easier to use the online forum from an association perspective? This question is for you, Will.
Yeah, I think we talked about Reddit and, things and existing social networks. The big thing for me in making people actually use it is pull on that familiarity cord. So for me, like, I looked at Reddit and I looked at, LinkedIn, and I was like, what makes these successful? Having a feed where people can catch up on all the posts coming in, having separate sections for things. So like, forums, I think, are where, I grew up. For example, like when I got in the events industry, I joined a DJ forum because I started as a DJ. And that was where I learned a lot of like general business ideas. Hey, how do you act as an MC for an event? What sort of gear are you using? And it was just a typical forum. The challenge with forums, I think now, compared to Reddit and compared to LinkedIn, is that you have to kind of click through and really like give it time for you to really dive deep into each individual one, the general section, the Q&A section, where in reality, this is where I think social networks do it better, like Reddit and LinkedIn, is that the ability to create the combined feed to say, here's the things I'm interested in and curate the way you want it to be. So I use Circle as an example because that's what I power Event Profs community with. And I basically wanted to make it so people could join and leave groups. So for example, we have like a ask the community section where you just ask a question and people will chime in and give you answers. We have one called looking for vendors. So, everybody always asks like, hey, does anybody know an amazing event company in Colorado, right? Like that's where people go. But some people might say, to be honest, I don't care about people looking for vendors. I'm here just to Q&A. That's what I want to do. They can leave those sections and then they have one single feed that feeds them the latest posts and everything like that. I think that's what makes these forums and these social networks so popular, is that I go to one spot, I can see what I need to catch up on, and I can really quickly see like what's new and what's not new, versus it making it, I really have to dig to find the stuff I want to know what's going on.
Nice. Amanda, thanks for the question. Well, let's talk a little bit about AI, right? I think AI, obviously it's a topic, it's on everywhere, it's all over the place. I think let's just be super specific with it so it's helpful for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Cut through the bullshit per se. But my first question is, how will AI impact events, right? That's first one. And then the second one on that is, what are specifics? Like, let's walk through specifics of like the way people are going to see it impacting either their job, the event that they hold, whatever it may be.
Oh my gosh. So I could do a whole like hour-long episode just on this alone. So I'll try to give the high levels. So one thing that I commonly say is, it's not AI that's going to replace you. It's somebody who's using AI is going to replace you. So this is like the cell phone moment with the iPhone, with calculators and math. It's not that necessarily these tools are going to completely replace somebody, but it's a tool that you can utilize to do more. So with that mindset in place, the way I always see, for example, I'm going to use ChatGPT as the example. It's the leading tool. OpenAI is doing great things. I think that if you're not using ChatGPT every day, you're probably missing out on time savings. So for me, right now, today, it's all about time savings, especially with written word. So for example, I'll use a real example so you can all hear us. Tomorrow, I'm going to post something on LinkedIn talking about this award I won. Honestly, for me to like summarize down into one sentence what the award is about, why I'm like happy to do it, all these things like that. Instead, I took the articles that are talking about it. I gave it, some experience, some information about who I am. And, I basically took my latest job at working at Klik and my job description I put in LinkedIn. And I said, can you write a LinkedIn post saying why I'm happy to be winning this award? And it just did it for me. You all are going to hear that right now. So you're going to be like, holy crap, that's really disingenuous, Will. And I can't believe you used AI to accept an award. But in reality is most people are not going to recognize that I did that way. But also the time it would have taken for me to really think, this is how I want to describe the award. Otherwise I would just say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I just won the Catalyst Award for this. Here's a link. It would just been boring and generic, right? So for us as event people, we need to start utilizing it to help us write things that we are commonly takes us a long time to write and put together. So for example, session descriptions, responding to customer inquiries, especially when they're angry at us, by the way. Everyone has this, an angry attendee, an angry vendor, an angry some sort of stakeholder. And a lot of times, like the example I use is how we can really help immediately pull back and save time is a lot of times we get these angry emails. We don't want to answer it in the heart of it because we're so pissed that we don't want to like yell right back, right? But in reality is, feed it to the AI, which has no emotion. It can logically put together an answer and might be able to literally say what you're planning on saying and be like, wow, it said it so much more nicer than I would have ever used it. That's just one example, but anything written word, we need to start utilizing for it. The thing I think that is powerful now, and I can start confidently saying this now that the tools are really getting there. OpenAI announced yesterday that no longer is the data cutoff for like its understanding of the world from September 2021. It is now April 2023. And their goal is to shorten that gap as much as possible so it understands what happened yesterday in the context of the world that we live in. So for example, you can start asking it things like who won the World Series a month ago and actually get the right answer versus the answer for September 2021. But the most important thing is the more context we give it, the more that we can also use it to help us automate, jobs and work that we're doing. So, one thing that I really love doing is giving it a bunch of URLs to give it context and things. Hey, here's the Klik product page. Now ChatGPT understands what Klik is. And now I can say, hey, maybe here's some other things, keywords that I'm going after, whatever it may be. And now I can have it actually start writing marketing content, marketing lingo for me, which in reality used to take me a long time because there's the ideation phase, there's the, check back on copy, the editing phase, all that stuff takes time. But now we can literally write things like that very, very quickly. So where I see everyone able to use it right now is writing and saving time and using it as a tool to save us time from a productivity standpoint.
Well, first of all, one thought I had on that was the difficulty of responding to customer inquiries, I think, is an interesting one. Like if you're running an event, you have an unhappy person, people typically shy away from responding to confrontation. It's difficult. People don't even like telling people negative things, even if it's not in a mean way, right? People don't want to say it. So I think that's a great, like a simple little nugget that you're just like, hey, put it into ChatGPT, let them tell you what to say. It takes the emotion out of it, right?
Yeah.
What about from a data perspective, right? Because to me, data at events is a very important topic in the sense that obviously there's been this long-standing fight on big third-party events where the association to the sponsor exhibitor are sort of like, the association has the data of all the attendees, of everything going on. They don't want to give it up for some of it for good reason. And then the sponsor exhibitor's like, I need this data. I need it because I need ROI, blah, blah, blah. So data's becoming more relevant in events, specifically now with softwares and the involvement of softwares and lead capture and running events on softwares. It's just going to become abundant and it's going to become important. What role does AI play in either curating, accelerating, or just helping organize data? How does that work?
Yeah. So like I'll start with like thinking we'll dive definitely deeper into the exhibitor and maybe how that could potentially be used properly. But I do think like, with tools like Klik, you now have the ability to collect more data than ever, right? Like I can tell, what's the dwell time of this area and things like that. The challenge with the data piece as well that I see very commonly amongst event professionals is that you have data and you're like, data is important, but then like, how do I draw trends and actionable insights from them? So I'll give more shout outs to OpenAI's recent announcement yesterday as they added this new tool called GPTs. They basically are going to build an app store for chatbots. So, and what's cool is you can build these GPTs using no code. You literally have a conversation with ChatGPT to say what you want and how it's built, and then it will build it and you can test it and then deploy it as its own separate GPT. And one of the most recent ones is a data analyzer. You literally can drag and drop spreadsheets in and all these things like that, and it'll look at the trends and things like that. And then this is where I think it starts to become powerful is that when we look at a spreadsheet, sometimes, not everyone's analytically focused to be able to draw trends by looking at a spreadsheet. Now you have this tool to be able to have a conversation with it. Say, you could ask ChatGPT, what's some interesting things you see from this data? And that's a very open-ended question. It's going to look at it and be like, it's really interesting. From this year to this year, you saw a 25% increase at 9 a.m. for your registrants to show up and grab their badges. Or, hey, we saw that 40% of people actually ate at the food that came at the conference. Maybe we should consider reducing our budget. And like, you can start having conversations in a natural way, which is how we're all used to talking, because we don't talk in terms of spreadsheets. We don't say cell A equals 100, which is greater than cell B, which is 200. All these things like that. Like it allows us to have this really natural conversation about the data that we care about and to be able to draw those insights. And my hope is that this also saves time for people to do this faster. So whereas before you might have to say, hey, let me get the data, let me look at it a month later. My prediction is that, we're going to start collecting more data about events with, smart wearables and things like that we're seeing. But next is that we can take that data and start having real-time decision-making, and the time between receiving the data and analyzing the data and acting upon the data, the more that we can make that window as close as possible, the more that we can do actionable things. And it's very similar to like used to be with Fitbits and things like that. They'd say, oh yeah, this is how many steps you did at the end of the day. And you'd be like, oh man, wish I had known that halfway through the day. But if you notice that now it's smart enough on Apple Watches that like, it'll be like, you're not going to hit your goal based on your pace, based on the number of steps. You should consider up and get going and moving around. Now we can take these real-time analytics and give real-time feedback to create real-time changes in behavior.
The predicting missed goals piece that you just touched on at the end was, I mean, a bunch of that stuff was good. Sorry, I was trying to write some of this down. Being able to sort of like aggregate and populate that data to give you information, right? I mean, if you're a large enough event and you have enough information, it's probably very difficult to sort through. It takes weeks, months, maybe. So the speed in which you can do that to then allow you to make decisions or allow you to know how to follow up, allow you to know how to respond to maybe questions, right? It's just good stuff. The predicting missed goals is interesting. What you just said there about like, it's already kind of, so that's got to play into events and benchmarks. I'm sure large events have benchmarks, right? Obviously, everybody's at least trying to set them. So you would essentially, by using AI with data that you're tracking during the day of the event, you could know kind of where you stand.
Yeah. I mean, like, imagine that you go into the chatbot and you say, hey, here's my top 10 goals of what I'm trying to accomplish. I'm trying to get more networking. I'm trying to make sure my exhibitors get more leads compared to last year. I'm trying to make sure that people are really happy with the content. You give it those goals. It goes, hey, yeah, I understand your goals. And then you say, here's a spreadsheet of information. Did I hit my goals? Or am I close to hitting my goals? I would hope it'd be more real time. But let's say, for example, on day one, you drag and drop your stats into it and it says, yo, your goal was to get more attendee engagement, but, based on the data that we're tracking, we see that only, 50% of attendees have actually even met each other so far, or met at least met less than, 50% attendees have met, less than two people. So, hey, how can we get it so we have them engage with more people? And that's when you start to think, okay, well, I really think, and I apologize for everybody out there, I think very much like, how do you use tools like Klik to do this now? Because it used to be before, I'd be like, yep, we'll do that and hope it's good. Like that's literally how we used to do it, is literally like by putting your finger up in the air and saying, yeah, it's 27 degrees out, right? But now with tools like this, I'm thinking about things like, if you can track your attendees in their location and you track how many connections that they make with each other, now you can say, what areas of the event do people meet the most amount of people? And this is extremely important for a huge line item, which we usually have at events, which is like the open bar. You'll always hear the argument over why we need an open bar. And why do we need, to keep the drinks flowing? Because everyone says it increases networking. Well, now you can say like, did my 25% increase in the open bar lead to 25% more connections, or was it lopsided in some sort of way? So there's a lot of ways I think we can start using data to be able to understand like what actually matters for our events and doing more of that, rather than like, what I feel, I have a very big bone to pick with food and beverage companies right now. Is like, we spend so much money on food and beverage, but in reality, like, who actually eats the food at these convention centers? Like, do you actually enjoy it? Was it actually more convenient? Or should we just like start giving a 3-hour break for lunch, giving them a list of 5 restaurants within walking distance, and then, sending people on their way and letting them actually have time to enjoy their conversations at their meals, rather than, hey, how can I shove down this mediocre wrap sandwich that I was giving in within a convention center? And by the way, like, I'm just going to end up hating it completely. And the only reason I did it is because it was free. Right. Like, I think these sort of conversations is what we really need to be talking about in the events industry moving forward, rather than, what's the Pantone color of the year.
So I feel like one of the things that I've seen, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is essentially, events were what they were in 19, then you had 20, right? Started coming out at the end of 21. It got this like huge reset. And then it was just like off to the races, right? And now we've gotten to here where it's pretty stable. It's good. It's back. I've heard all those things. It is 100% undeniable. You just look at everybody's books and what's happening in the numbers. Yeah, I've seen things about the growth rate over the next 8 years looks really, really good. All things are good. My question to you is, and it's really, I guess, more just like my thoughts and asking what you think, but is I just think events in general, the whole industry has to get smarter and better. Like the industry has to get better, right? It's like, I feel like before, so much shit was just done because it's always been done. And it was like, it was just okay. It was like, oh, people go, they show up, but under the breath, people are like, this sucks. God, why am I here again? But now you're getting people starting to challenge these things and be like, this event's not any good. This should, and all the tech, all the concepts of trying to create ROI, all these ideas of giving these exhibitors, these attendees, these organizers, people more resource, more tool to actually create output for better events. That is a trend, like a major trend that I am seeing is a push by a lot of areas to say, we got kicked in the face. Now we're back. And people are like, this stuff has to get better. Like in so many different areas, better, smarter, more business savvy. Am I wrong there? What are your thoughts?
No, I definitely agree with you. Like, so this is why it's so important that we have to get better in a very short period of time, is that with the decline of content marketing, with it becoming harder and harder to compete for attention online and things like that, marketers are looking for, how do I actually influence behavior? How do I actually get a captive audience for my products and services and my brand? And what they realize is events are freaking working. They're like the best.
Yeah.
Like people literally sometimes leave events and sign massive contracts with software companies just because they had a great time at the event, whatever it may have been that did it. And so what I think is happening is that events are no longer just the, hey, we know it's good. It naturally creates connections. It brings brand awareness. Now we have tools for marketers to actually create successful events, to track the data and do all the things that we used to do, like with content marketing and social media and things like that. And now we're dumping money into events from a marketing activity. And really, I think what's going to happen is that in the next 3 or 4 years, everyone's going to look at events as being like, this is my stable core for my marketing strategy. So where I feel like what you said about the idea that like we have to do better is like, we also have to throw out these playbooks we've had from 2019 and beyond and earlier. Everybody who's doing things the same way is seeing a slow decline, and those who are willing to reinvent themselves and dare to do more are going to see great results from it and are not going to get blown away from the competition.
Yeah, it feels like a little bit of like a bell curve, right? It feels like, events were thriving. And then I write about this all the time. I say that the maturity of the internet, people just didn't realize it, but the maturity of the internet just kicked events in the ass. It just did. It was easier to get to your customer, easier to find them, easier to prospect, easier to target, easier to do so many things. And people are like, why do I need to go to this event? Like I can target that person with Zoom info and LinkedIn. Yeah. And now the bell curve's coming back where like all good things like the internet and the maturity of it, people have just saturated the shit out of it. And it's almost hard to saturate events. It's almost hard because it's this interpersonal one-on-one face-to-face, what you're getting. There's no tricks, which I find interesting. And I think now the opportunity is really to get smarter, get better, do things in a more, I don't want to say professional, but like systemized, like meaningful way, maybe.
More
I guess.
like ROI driven way, I think.
Yeah, like why does this make sense? Like I did a panel show recently, with Tavar James, John Wolf, and Nancy Toohill, and like a lot of the conversations, John Wolf was talking. He's like, we're not making emotional decisions on a trade show or an event. We're not, just so the organizers and associations know. He's like, we're not looking at it like, oh, we always go. We're going to be there. Sure thing. Like, he's not doing that. He's thinking like, was this good? Was it a good use of our resource? Good use of our time? Did we get a return? Or not even just return, because that gets overused. Those are the things I think with just like people are getting smarter, and events need to jump and evolve to that where, they're getting the support, offering services and everything that you need. And I'm seeing a lot of good things.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you on that. Like I've always said that, one of the biggest challenges within the events industry is that the event professional wants to get closer and closer to that C-suite level. The challenge has been that the event organizer needs to start thinking like a C-suite person does, which is based on like, what is my objectives for the year and how does this help accomplish them? And how do I actually measure it with data? If you can do that, you're going to start getting a seat at the table
Yeah.
that everybody wants to have. And, it's possible now, but the problem is you can't stay stuck in design land and the things that get us in the events industry about creating amazing experiences are also sometimes the things that like drive us away from these, more business-like decisions.
What are you seeing as like, I don't want to say what's the future of events, right? It's a bad question. The way I would ask it is like, what are you seeing as like really applicable changes? What is really going to happen, or positive things that you see that will kind of adjust the landscape or just, impact the industry?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like what I talked about a little bit earlier too, in terms of like, you kind of seeing this decline of content marketing. It's becoming harder and harder to market to people right now. A lot of people have a question mark above their heads about what's like the true strategy now for marketing. Now it's like, I think this year it has been very much like, okay, we're doing all these things, spinning all these plates simultaneously because they worked in the past, but we're seeing a decline in terms of our effectiveness with them. So I think what we're going to start to see is that events are going to start becoming a big, large key of marketing strategies. Some other trends that I'm starting to see as well is like, the rise of not the rise of it. I mean, it's already been rising, but like the actual action taken on what's called conscious conferencing. So focusing on DEI, focusing on sustainability events, like actually making actions towards it, not just making a talk track for the year. We talked a lot about data, all the stuff I'm talking about data, and like, how do we actually measure the people on site at our events and not just looking at it as oh yeah, it's great that we spent $50,000 more dollars on this, right? That's a big piece of it. Community and how do we create community within events is also huge. And then if I had to pick one more kind of large trend that I'm starting to see too, is that, we have to figure out ways to think smarter about our sponsorships and our, exhibiting experiences out of our events. Like, I think like there are ways to do it again through data to be able to help people achieve what they need to achieve and know if it was successful or not. But a lot of what's happening, and I literally talked to someone about sponsoring an event just last week, and it was so funny how it just felt so much like they were stuck in like maybe 2006 like sponsorship things where they're like, here's our packages, you pick from it. And then I said, okay, well, here's my 5 objectives of what I'm trying to achieve. So I want this, 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 and this, and this, and here's how much money I'm willing to give you. And then they come back and go, oh, well, if you want that one little thing, it's part of another package, which gives you way more stuff that we don't really want. And I think that's really what's happening is people are just like, oh, instead of having a conversation about how do we strategically incorporate the event as my marketing strategy, they're instead just like, oh yeah, buy this package, get this in return. And I'm like, that doesn't work anymore. So I think we have to start thinking differently about those.
Probably on that case, I would probably, it's just a shot in the dark, but essentially think that maybe the wrong objectives and deliverables that they're being told they need to meet, right? Kind of, which sets the wrong behavior, essentially. So I'm going to give you, I was writing because I was writing my thoughts as I was listening to you, right? Which is, I don't know how good I am at that, but I'm going to give you a little bit of like a Jeopardy board, right? Of cool. Things that are trending. So, and I'm going to let you choose a topic and then we'll both talk about it. Cool. Because I think some of the things that I'm seeing that are trending, I'll give you my 3. One I wrote was tech maturity. I think technology is maturing and people are like, tech, I don't want to deal with it, but it's going to mature. And then if you don't get a grasp on it and you don't utilize it to the best of your ability, I think it's going to kick you in the face. Right. I think events being looked at more so by like as a strategy, which what we've discussed, you've hit on that. I'm a firm believer in that. And I put influencers and partnerships, right? So those are those 3. You put conscious conferencing, data, community, and sponsorships. Pick one of those 7, and we'll dive into that sort of trend. So you got tech maturity, event strategy, influencers, partnerships, conscious conferencing, data, community, and sponsorships as trends and things that we will see evolve. And we have a question to get to.
Yeah. Should we go to the question first because I want to talk about that question, but it's related to a topic we just talked about. So yeah, I think, you go ahead.
We'll double reverse back. Don't worry. Question
from Rachel.
Oh, you can. I see RC. Maybe my block is Rachel. Great. Thank you, Rachel, for the question. Well, thanks for the assist there. How would you tailor event sponsorships to 10,000 attendees? Everyone has their objectives.
Yeah. So, likely what's happening is the sponsor is coming in because they want to reach your ideal audience, which in this case is all 10,000 attendees. I don't think that there's many cases where I sponsored an event and I'm only looking to get 5 people to come. If maybe it's highly strategic, you know, the CEO of Apple is going to be there and you just need to get him as a customer, right? Like, okay, that's probably an edge case scenario on here, but chances are that if I was doing tailored event sponsorships, is that this is the first question I always ask all my sponsors. What are your objectives? You know, is it that you're brand new and you just need people to be aware of your brand and your logo and things like that? Well, that has completely different objectives than, you know, for example, that sponsorship I was working on, I was looking for leads and I wanted actual leads that were going to come in. And the big thing for me in my sponsorship was, and this is where they started like pulling me in different ways, is that they started saying like, okay, well, this is how much sponsorship dollars you have. This is what we can do for you. And I said, okay, well, we're giving you this technology. We want to put sponsored by Bizzabo above the badge so people know this is our tech. My goal is to get people who need this and want this and like this to know it's us and to reach out to us. They came back and said, no, you need a lanyard sponsorship, which is usually just the name printing on the actual lanyard. And the reason why that costs so much more money is that I'm covering all the lanyard costs, right? Well, in reality, you know, I'm not looking about the lanyard. In fact, you could still sell the lanyard sponsorship. I just want to put one line of text right here, and I'm willing to give you money for it, and you could still sell your lanyard sponsorship. They fell into a place where they literally thought to themselves, here's the box I'm in. I can only do this. And I think that's where a lot of sponsorship people get stuck, is this idea that it's like, it's more about me as the organizer and what I need to accomplish than it is about what the sponsor needs to accomplish. And you'd be really surprised that when you have that conversation, say, what's your objectives? What have you worked on in the past? What's worked? What hasn't worked? What would be an ideal outcome for you? You can have a much better conversation. And chances are the sponsor needs a lot less than you think they need. But because you put them into a sponsorship package, because they're giving you so much money, that chances are that you're giving them maybe even stuff they don't even care about. You know, like we always talk about like the joke about how I'm going to throw your logo up on our website. And I'm like, cool, with 25 other logos, no one knows who, you know, Bizzabo is. So how is that going to get me more leads? Right? Like this is a challenge I think that we have when it comes to it. So what I would say, my advice to you, Rachel, is just ask the sponsor, what are you looking to achieve in your business in the next year? And what do you have in mind? And let's start with that. And chances are, and this is the part that kind of frustrated me with the sponsorship conversation, all the things we asked for didn't conflict with any other sponsorship things. They weren't exclusives. They weren't, you know, things that like would massively impact, you know, taking up more space on a banner, or, oh my gosh, it's more work for you guys. We asked them for very simple things that didn't conflict with anybody. And instead of being like, yes, we'll help you achieve that and like make it a win-win, instead it was, how can me as the organizer win? And that was the part that ended up having us kind of feeling a little bit sour in the mouth about our sponsorship.
Good answer there, Will. Rachel, what I would add is I think you should try to put yourself in the people that are paying the sponsor's shoes, right? So if you were them, like one thing that I would always think with sponsorship is I want to be creative, not disruptive. Right? I want to be creative. I want to get my message out there. I want to have an impact. I don't want to do something just to do it. No one wants to sponsor just to sponsor unless you're a cause, right? Most of these things are not for a cause. So, you know, how can you create a win-win with your sponsorships? Right. And then how can you be creative, not disruptive? And like, I don't know, maybe come up with 10 crazy ideas that are a little bit different, a little bit off the shelf, and then call your best sponsors and say, hey, what do you think of this? Right? If it sucks, just tell me. If you love it, awesome. We're going to put this in a package this year or find a way to do it. Or if you want it right now, I'll give it to you at 70% off because you're giving me feedback. But those would just be 2 thoughts I would have there.
Love it. So good.
Wendy asked a question. It says, so I love when people start stuff with so, you know, you're in for it. The age-old question, how do I get client executives to engage early and often? They don't seem to get how important events are. They are really an afterthought. They lob it and say, just do it. And then it says, I want their engagement to discuss objectives and goals at the start, and I can't even get them to open an email. Suggestions. Wendy, I have very specific advice on this, and then I'll let Will go. What is important to the executives? What are the company initiatives going on that matter to them? High level, it's not going to be in the weeds type stuff. It's not even going to be middle ground stuff. It's going to be high level company initiatives that if they're shareholders, they're looking to create for them, or if it's not shareholders and it's private, whole company, there's still going to be initiatives to the company that are important now and maybe into the future. I would be looking to spark their interest by tying the success of events into those initiatives. And if you can't pique their interest with things that they are trying to accomplish through the company, I don't know how you're going to pique their interest. And they may just have a view of events as a cost of doing business, which is unfortunate. And even then, I would try to navigate through your company to figure out, or whoever you're working with, if you're producing for a company, what are the big time company initiatives, and build the event around it. Then go to them and say, hey, what do you think now? This is what we contributed.
Yeah, I'll build upon that, because I think you bring up this good point of like what matters most to them. And I think being short and succinct with it too. Chances are that, yeah, they don't care about like a lot of the details. So the more, as someone who has been an executive, like I luckily got to hire a CEO to replace me of my agency. But, for me, I want very specific, like, yes, no, here's the numbers I'm looking for, whatever it may be, and to give that feedback. So for example, I would ask them is, what are our goals as a company this year? Okay, if you already know what those are, say, hey, I'm working on an event. I look to achieve our goals by doing X, Y, Z. Is this good with you? Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Or, hey, how many leads are you looking that we need to get from this event to hit our sales goal? Like, ask very, very specific questions about what's necessary on there. And then ideally you're coming back and saying, oh, look, we achieved it, or we didn't achieve it, and here's how we need to fix it for the next time. That's how I would get executive buy-in, is keeping it short and succinct and very tied to that high level strategy about what they're worrying about, rather than like, let's get in the weeds. Like, anytime an executive to me comes in and starts talking to me about like tablecloth colors or the flow of the show, I go, you don't need to be worrying about this. This is my job. I'll make sure it hits our objectives and things like that, and get them out of it. Because a lot of times too, they want that control. They want to micromanage, but in reality, like, you need to keep them in their space of thinking about strategy and telling you what that strategy is. And you need to be reporting back how you're helping achieve that strategy. And then that's how you make it where you start going from being like an event manager to being like chief event officer.
Nice. Love the questions. Always fun to answer. Thank you for asking. Thank you for engaging. It's good to have them, right? Because then we know kind of what you guys are looking to understand. Back to our Jeopardy board. Will.
Partners and influencers. I'll go with that one since we haven't
partners and influencers. You chose. Let's go. I think I would say my thoughts briefly is that there's opportunity there that people are not tapping into. I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, like, I think that partners and influencers have audiences that we're trying to reach, and sometimes even have communities that we're trying to reach as well. And the more that we can collaborate with them, the better. Like, I think, for example, if for example, we were talking about the marketing community Exit 5, I think is like amazing. I would immediately start saying like, hey, how can we take Exit 5 and maybe combine them with the Corporate Event Marketing Association and doing those events together and reaching the same audience, and it's a co-joint planned event. The more that you can bring influencers in to maybe host like a happy hour for their audience at an event, like, that's huge. Like, that's the way I think about it as much as possible, is how can you use events as like a platform, and then how can you plug in partners and influencers to help co-create it and bring their audiences along, to hope that they become your audience as well. Or what I think is the ultimate future, again, is they become part of your community and they want to join as part of that as well. The more that we can do that, I think we can start leveraging all the hard work that these people have done that aren't necessarily in our communities already.
It's also a win-win, right? When you're finding people with, who are influencers or partnerships, and, who are people that have the same ICP, right? Ideal client profile, who are the same as you, but they don't compete with you, right? Can you throw a host event together? Can you throw offsite activations, happy hours? Can you do, offsite engagement together, right? Because you're not competing, you're not competitors, but seemingly you have the same audience, right? That's more partnership for me. On the influencer side, oh man, I think that there's huge opportunity. You see a lot of consumer B2C companies just crushing it with, with influencers. And I don't really have the answer for the B2B just yet, but I think it's definitely there.
I think we're going to get there though. Like, right now, because B2B is a little bit less noisy than B2C, like B2C, like, if there's new shoe you need to be wearing. There's thousands of shoes to choose from. So you rely on these curators and these influencers to tell you what's the good things you need to know about, which I think is a very big part of marketing moving forward. That same thing I think is going to start to happen with events, is that as now content marketing is getting overcrowded and there's just so much noise and so much to look at, now we're going to be looking for like, what's the next thing? How do I know where to go? And influencers are going to become your curators for people.
Yeah. It's like, there's a guy I follow on Instagram, and he's an accountant. He somehow made accounting at least digestible on Instagram for me, right? As a business owner, I'm like, he says these little nuggets of things that I love, but like, if your ICP was business owners, he works with business owners, he's an accountant, he brings value, or there's accountants, let's say accountants are your ICP, but they're following him because he's educational, right? How do you involve his channel, him to influence? I don't know, just an idea of where to connect those dots. We got 4 minutes left, Will. Some of the other ones that we put up here as trending things: tech maturity, event as a strategy, conscious conferencing, data, community, sponsorships. Any other one that you'd like to dive into to close?
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with it. We talked about events as a strategy a little bit, so I'll check that one and just give it a yes to that one. The last one,
Great
I think
topic,
that we'll like conscious conferencing. There's just so much information about it. It's really just about doing it. So yes, definitely continue to like do it and actually implement your things you're going to make an impact doing. But I love your tech maturity, and I think this is worth talking about, is that we are seeing this big shift happen within technology related to, like, for example, all the people who are focusing just on virtual events are kind of like shrinking in terms of their power, and they're not developing as many features anymore. And you're seeing this rise of a lot of tools like Bizzabo and things like that existed in the in-person events for so long. And so I think what you're going to start to see is probably over the next year, there's not going to be like a massive amount of innovation in the events industry, but you're going to start to see this consolidation of everything. And the ones that are going to be left are going to be the ones who really thought long-term and have been around and have the experience to go through these ups and downs that we felt for the last few years.
Nice. Yeah. I think the tech maturity is a good one because it is something that people shy away from if they don't understand it, right? People are worried about implementation. People are worried about the features, the benefits, the gadgets, everything that goes with it. Will it be more difficult? But I think just essentially you have to have someone that knows how to do it, or you have to have a really good partner, or you have to be able to implement it, because the world will just whip by you if you're not doing it. And as events mature as a strategy, you need tools. You just need tools. And I think they're in a much better place than they were 18, 19. I mean, I've talked to a lot of tech vendor suppliers for our clients, to try to understand them. The level of detail, confidence, knowledge that I hear now versus 18, 19, right? It's better now. So I think it's a good one.
I agree.
Awesome. Will, where do people find you? Where should they go? Your community, right? How do they hunt you down?
Yeah. So easiest way to find me is willcurran.com. So if you see my name on the screen written anywhere, just go to that.com. Curran is spelled Curran if you're listening. If you try to search it, I'm sure it'll pop up on Google too. And that will have links to everything, to Klik, to the community, to see, past events, my podcasts, all that fun stuff's on there. But if you are interested specifically in the community, it's eventpropscommunity.com. And then if you're interested in Klik, it's Klik with a K, Klik, and check it out.
Awesome. As always, thank you, everybody, showing up. Thanks for giving us an hour. I try to keep it right on the hour, right? Give you the best hour we can. We are going to be releasing a bit of a schedule moving forward. We got holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, right? I know all you people will be on PTO. You don't want to be bothered. We will figure this out. We'll be scheduling some new people, some new live shows, hopefully a new tour that where we add in and give you as much of a schedule in advance as we can. But as always, thank you so much for showing up. Will, you were great. A lot of knowledge there. Super fun talking to you, and thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt. And I'll look forward to keeping our conversation going on the internet from now on.
Awesome, man. Thanks, everybody.